Welcome back to the channel, everyone, and today we'll be watching another video from Wavywebsurf, and this is disturbing squatter cases from around the internet. And all the squatter cases are almost as, okay, no, I was going to say almost as bad as tree law. No, they're worse than tree law, but man, we should watch some tree law stuff. Some of that stuff is crazy. But yeah, let's get into it. This guy's fantastic. I just love how his background's always lava lamps and random stuff. But yeah, let's watch one of these videos. There's also another one. It's the abandoned channels videos. We're gonna take a look at that too. But yeah, let's get into it.
Who enjoys learning about the various forms of crackheadery that goes on here in the United States?
I thought he was just gonna say on the internet, but yeah, okay, that sounds like the U.S. It's kind of like how the Sunshine Law works.
Squatting is one of the wackiest rabbit holes that there is to go down, and it's getting deeper every day.
Yeah, it got a lot worse during COVID when no one was enforcing anything. So, and my family was more or less in real estate for a long time. We're no longer in real estate because we did not want to deal with anything. So we got rid of all our stuff in like 2020-ish. So for now, luckily we got lucky, but we could have easily had the same problems as some of these people.
No, I'm not talking about the compound lift that many of you skip in the gym. I'm referring to squatters, the people that have used eviction laws and essentially managed to take over someone's property without paying any rent or even a dime to the bank.
Okay, to be fair, while some squatters do break into places, a lot of other squatters play the system a little bit differently. What they'll do is they'll pay like 3 months in advance rent. And a lot of homeowners are like, oh, yeah, I'll take that. That's great. And then they'll stop paying after that. And then they're stuck there for a year and a half. So you'll get your 3 months and that's it.
Oftentimes, these freeloaders ransack the properties that they squat in and act violent to any who attempt to remove them from the home.
You can say it wasn't that bad, but some places, you know, like foreclosures, which I've dealt with before, brand new, perfectly good house, walk in and there are, you know, they've taken sledgehammers to every toilet in the house, every fixture in the house. all the doors have holes in them, all the fireplaces are wrecked. Yeah, that's why foreclosures sometimes go for like $40K on a $500,000 house.
Home that they've infiltrated, resulting in some pretty insane altercations. From axe-wielding marauders to corpse-defiling drifters, all...
What? I mean, did she like die in her house or did they like murder her? Jeez.
The way to campers turned killers, these are the internet's most infamous squatters.
And unfortunately, this list is going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger because keeps happening.
Today's video is sponsored by Cook Unity. Cook Unity offers weekly batches of gourmet meals prepared by our country's best restaurants and chefs. This first case takes us to a luxurious log cabin on Nonaville Road in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. In 2012, the house went into foreclosure, after which it was transferred from bank to bank.
Okay, I feel a little less bad about this one right off the bat, considering it's a bank that's dealing with this. But if it was actually bought, let's see what happens.
JP Morgan to Bank of America to Nation Star Mortgage, and during this state of limbo, it was completely uninhabited and unmaintained. In 2014, there was an attempt to buy the home made by a family, but the deal fell through for unknown reasons. Now here's where a man by the name of Jude Pischke enters the picture. Jude had a bit of history with law enforcement going back a whole decade of the guy getting in trouble. Back in 2008, Jude was found illegally moving a modular home to a piece of land that he didn't own near the town of Hermitage in Tennessee. This brazen action would result in the man's modular home being condemned by authorities. Seeing that this log...
Okay, so he illegally moved a home. What was okay? Was it like a... Let's see here. I can't tell if he was trying to move like an actual, like, I assume it was a mobile home, right? He somehow got a mobile home condemned? That's interesting. I guess it was a log. So wait, he tried to move a log cabin All right, that's insane.
A cabin had been pretty much unoccupied, Jude would take advantage of this, moving his entire family to the property in October of 2014.
Oh, this log cabin. Okay, no, never mind. I didn't realize this giant house was effectively a log cabin. Okay.
He would end up staying here, living in the house for 2 whole years, even going as far as to pay back taxes for the property.
Interesting. So he was trying to prove that he owned the house. That's why he was doing it.
In order to make sure that the house wouldn't be seized by the government. This whole time, he would somehow fly under everyone's radar, despite the fact that the police had actually been called to this property because of him before due to a domestic dispute that him and his wife had back in April of 2015.
I mean, if the bank's not checking on it, then why would the police know anything about this? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't matter. They're not connected, really.
And if that wasn't enough, they even found a stolen car in the parking lot in September. And when they looked into him, they couldn't find any connection between him and the house, so he was just let be. In April of 2017,
Okay, that's pretty funny.
News Channel 5 released an explosive report on Jude, detailing the whole history of the property and how it had found itself into the hands of the man. More importantly for us, though, they also sent out a crew to interview the man himself. And this interaction is exactly why the case would become so infamous.
Bank
You don't have I don't give a
bank says you don't have a right to
You know what I got to say?
When did you move in?
Don't matter. None of your business.
Throughout this interview,
Does this house have power and water and everything? I guess solar could offset that a bit, but that's interesting.
Jude acts like he pretty much has full reign over the
I guess with enough propane, you can just ignore everything else, right?
property, like it's legally his, and gets aggressive with the crew for trying to pry into his business. Eventually, the news crews would get under Jude Pishka's skin so much that, well, he pretty much roid rages out and tries to hack one of them up with the fucking axe.
But as we discovered, getting Pischke to leave may not be easy.
This is not your property. The bank says you have no right to be here.
As Pischke walked to his truck, we didn't realize what was about to happen.
Let me see here. What would you like to get you with? This is probably worth one. Got it.
Oh, it's an actual axe. Okay.
Here.
All right.
Go, God.
We're backing up.
No, leave, God.
We're leaving right now. Don't hit. We're leaving right now.
The news
Somehow, I don't think he was actually going to hit them, but I mean, some people are literally crazy. So maybe.
station would end up filing a police report, which would lead to Jude being arrested for aggravated assault.
Yeah.
He paid $6,000 in bond to get out of jail, at which point he was released and allowed to go back to the house. But he soon found his way back to jail again on May 2nd, spending another 17 days there, as this aggravated assault arrest had put him in violation of probation that he was already on. He pled guilty to one charge of aggravated assault, getting 2 years probation for his trouble. The bank that owned the property, Nation Star, had been notified by News Channel 5.
I like how the bank's just like, oh, is that one of our properties? It's cool. We don't care. Like, they kind of care, but they forgot about it for years. So obviously it's not a huge deal to them.
Which assured the news station that they would take steps to evict the alleged squatter in order to sell the property off. The story still
But they did. Okay, so the bank didn't even know they had this property, apparently.
doesn't quite end here, however. Jude would be officially handed eviction papers, but he tried to stay as long as he could, even while the property was being listed for sale at auction for $231,000. Jude, though, wasn't done with the bank yet, as he tried to get his own side of the story out there by contacting Fox 17. Now, during the
Yeah, of course Fox would take this. That sounds like something Fox would do. They're like, yeah, we'll deal with this crazy guy. This sounds like fun.
interview, Jude starts to form this little narrative that what he was doing on the property wasn't squatting. He was engaging in a practice known as adverse possession. For those of you who don't,
Is this something to do with the what is the Is this the sovereign citizen thing?
No, adverse possession is a law which states that if you live on a property that doesn't belong to you for an extended period of time while maintaining it, you become eligible to be the property owner. Or to put it differently, if a landlord doesn't evict a squatter in a swift enough manner, the squatter can basically make the point that the house should belong to them.
How did this law come into be? Like, I assume it was specific to like very specific scenarios in the past, like, you know, an entire family just abandons a house for whatever reason, everyone dies in it or whatever, and then it just lays abandoned for, you know, 40 years, and then someone comes over and takes it over. But I don't know, it's interesting.
Because they're the ones taking care of it. It's really fucking stupid, but America.
Yeah, that's I wonder if any other country has something as dumb as this. I don't know. Maybe it's something akin to like how council estates work in the UK. Well, probably not. Don't quote me on that. Go yell at me in the comments about it.
Jude would also reveal that he'd attempted to make a deal with the bank, wherein he would actually buy the property, although presumably for a much lesser payment than the $231,000 ask price. When asked about the whole assaulting a news crew situation, he gives an alternative reasoning for that as well, explaining he simply wanted to get them to leave because he was in fear for his own life.
I mean, maybe not in fear, but man, have you seen news crews and paparazzi and that type of thing? Those guys are relentless. They do not leave at all. They just continuously hound you until you do something about it.
He says in that moment,
they're like debt collectors, but of news.
Flight instincts kicked in, and he simply responded in the worst, hastily, violent way possible. Unfortunately for Jude and the 4 kids that he had living there, the eviction process would eventually be completed, at which point his entire family was unhoused from the property. A young couple would then buy the home and promptly move in.
I mean, what's he doing now? It doesn't sound like he got any major prison time. Do you think he went and did this to another house? Probably.
This second case takes us to Detroit, Michigan. In October of 2014, a woman by the name of Sarah Hamilton bought a house in the city and had plans to flip this property as an investment. However, not long after she had purchased
This is one where someone broke into it, isn't it?
A woman by the name of Lynn Williams decided to squat on the property and was refusing to leave. During the confrontation,
technically the first guy also broke in, but the little bit of a difference is they broke into one that the bank didn't even know they apparently even owned, so it was a little bit less of a I'd say, it was wrong still, but I'd say it was less of a, it wasn't a victimless crime per se. The bank was kind of the victim there, but they still sold it, so I don't know.
With Lynn and the homeowner, police were called to the scene, and when they arrived, the would-be squatter Lynn claimed that the homeowner had attempted to run her over with the vehicle, which actually resulted in Sarah being put in jail. Meanwhile,
that's crazy.
Lynn moved all of her stuff back into the house and continued to squat there unabated.
Wait a second. Was she living there like as a tenant temporarily?
We would get a full recap just a couple of weeks later in an episode of The Americans with Charlie LaDuff, where the titular presenter decided to give Lynn a taste of her own medicine, intending to squat in the house, but with the actual permission of the owner. You know, the guy basically showing up this squatter like, all right, if this is free reign, then I'm about to move my ass in here too, bitch.
May I have your permission to enter your domicile?
You have my permission.
May I have the keys?
Sure can.
So maybe you're a squatter trying to outmaneuver a squatter.
Charlie would have the police accompany him for safety due to Lynn's history with felonious assault using a deadly weapon. Then Charlie walks right up to the porch where Lynn was standing to confront her. And I highly recommend you guys actually go in your own time and watch this video.
That video sounds intense and crazy.
But pretty much what happens is Charlie approaches the house while wearing a white bathrobe, making it clear to everyone that he's about to move in and make himself comfortable.
Wonderful.
I'm coming to move in.
You are?
Yeah, I got the keys. What's for dinner?
I'm not cooking dinner. I'm finna go pick up my child.
Oh,
Yeah.
can I get in?
No, sir.
But I have the deed here.
You do?
Yeah, here's the deed. Here's the check.
All right.
Here's the deed, and I got permission from the landlord.
Okay, tell the landlord to come here.
I can legally go in there.
To Lynn's credit, she actually
Damn.
remains relatively polite throughout the whole ordeal, admitting that she does indeed to squat on the property and that because she's made improvements on the house, she somehow deserves to live there. This isn't exactly enough for her to come across as particularly sane, though, as she ends up admitting on air that she was actually stealing electricity from another house.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Hooked up legit there?
My power is...
That's not legit.
It's not legit.
No, you stealing a little bit of power.
I am blessed.
Eventually,
Smart. She didn't admit anything on camera.
the police arrive on scene, at which point they start investigating Lynn once again for the alleged squatting. And, you know, she tries to prove that she actually has the legal right to live there. Her effort this time is to show them a piece of mail that was, you know, sent to her at the address. So I guess in her mind, that's like, if someone mailed something to me at this address...
Oh, yeah. That's exactly what I feel like when I get hundreds of garbage letters in the mail.
it says my name, it's my house now, right? I'm going to start mailing shit all over the country
Yeah.
with my name on it and just start fucking living in people's houses if that's how it works.
You should try that in Texas. See where that goes, get you.
This visit from police would actually result in Lynn getting arrested, which is recorded live on air.
Only thing that I have stays here until she...
Oh,
I'm going to jail for squatting.
that's a turn of events.
Call my boyfriend next up.
Turns out that this whole ordeal actually put Lynn in violation of previous probation that was on, which in result had her...
So, for instance, if she wasn't on probation for anything, they couldn't have arrested her. But because she already had something, they could get her. Okay, but
facing upwards to 2 years in prison. Unfortunately, I'm unable to ascertain her court records at this time, so I can't figure out what happened after all of this, but needless to say, she hasn't
I want to know what happened to the first guy with the axe. Did he just break into some other house?
been causing Sarah Hamilton any more issues.
The cult squatters? Oh,
Our
God.
next story highlights a group of mysterious squatters that some believe were up to some cult-like practices. For this one, we're going to have to go to Vacaville, California, to the small town of Vallejo. And as far as the squatting reports go in today's video, this is one of the worst cases. Sometime around the end of 2019, a group of people would reportedly start squatting on a property belonging to one Kurt Lind, who at the time would have been in his late 70s. Pretty quickly, Kurt would attempt to evict them off the property, but these squatters were stubborn. It seems he had to make a compromise of sorts with them, wherein they would be allowed to stay there only as long as it took for them to fix their vehicles that they had broken down, and then after that, they would be
Yeah, that was never going to happen.
off the property for good. However, as you've probably gotten used to by now, this promise fell through, and it was now up to him to try to evict them. Kurt's attempts to get this gang off of his property proved even more difficult after the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States and California.
Okay, that alone screwed up so many things. You thought squatters were bad before this, but man, COVID did a massive number on how people were able to squat for effectively years. And still are kind
instituted
of
its
messing around
eviction
with it.
moratorium. As a result of this, the alleged squatters would stay on the property uninterrupted for the next 3 years. All the while, as the story goes, getting up to some rather strange shenanigans. The neighbors who lived nearby described the group as behaving rather erratically, sometimes even walking around the property naked and talking to themselves. These same neighbors would eventually come to call the group the Cult. Eventually, after about 3 years of fruitlessly trying to get them off of his property, he was able to secure a court order to evict the squatters.
Finally.
The Cult, as you might expect, was not too thrilled about this, and they became highly belligerent. They would allegedly go to Kurt's trailer, which appears to have been on the same property, around 2:30 a.m., and they threw rocks at his house and tried to beat down his door. The story gets a tad bit confusing from here, as around 2:30 a.m., either Kurt himself or a neighbor and a friend of his, one Patrick McMillian, called the police.
That's a good last name, McMillian.
Different reports say different things, but I believe that it was actually Patrick that called the police. Regardless, when the police were called to this property, dispatch told them that they'd be sending out police officers soon. Those officers never actually arrived.
See, that's what I hate about it. They're like, yeah, officers will be there in 20 minutes, and they never show up.
Here's where things would escalate. Again, this report is a bit muddled on what actually happens here, but the basic gist is that at some point, a confrontation between the homeowner and the squatters occurred, during which one of the squatters pulled out something only described as a samurai sword, and then they stabbed clean through the man. Kurt then, either prior to being attacked or right after being attacked, pulled out a firearm and shot 2 of the 3 attackers.
What? I mean, okay, nice. Jeez.
Kurt, rapidly fading, would then stumble out of his trailer and come up to Patrick's
So, wait, did he kill 2? Okay.
trailer, where he begged his old friend for help. Quickly, Patrick called the police, who did actually arrive this time instead of just ignoring the call like they had done previously. The EMTs would also arrive as well with the KTVU news crew,
Of course.
who would do an interview with some of the people present at the time.
That is the craziest nonsense I've ever heard. And we're only 15 minutes into this video.
Among which was Macmillan himself, who gave a rather sordid description of the incident.
I heard banging on the door, and I went and it was Kurt, and he says, "I'm dying." And I saw him with this samurai sword sticking through his back and came out his chest about here. Had a flap of his face cut off and blood.
As per KTVU's latest report, one of the 2 suspects who had been shot, a 31-year-old woman who wouldn't ever be named, had died on the scene.
Well, I guess some justice was served there.
The other 2 suspects, 21-year-old Suri Dow and 27-year-old Alexander Jeffrey Leatham, would both be charged with her murder. As for Kurt, he miraculously ended up surviving the...
Damn. Yeah, I was stabbed in the back through the chest with the samurai sword. I lived. I am God.
attack, even though he had quite literally a samurai sword sticking through his back and heavy lacerations to his face. Sadly, it seems his right eye would be a complete write-off. Not to mention that he racked up a lot in medical bills due to hospitalization. In order to help him with recovery, his son made a GoFundMe for Kurt. The goal was set at $60,000. It would end up raising about $18,000. Since then,
yeah, that's stupid. The amount of YouTubers who get hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations to fight each other in lawsuits that are semi-irrelevant to a lot of other people. And then this happens to this guy, and he only gets 17 grand.
And I can't find any news on the situation, although I assume the area has probably been cleared out at this point in time. I also couldn't find any obituaries either, suggesting that Kurt is still alive to this day.
Still, someone should re-up that GoFundMe.
Squatters are known to invade and raid homes, but what about when someone's home is technically a grave? Well, this next case will discuss some Las Vegas grave robber squatters. As the story goes, a house belonging to 82-year-old Lucille Payne had been occupied by squatters in early 2021. When they settled in, they started selling off her property and draining her finances, with no one making any attempts to unhouse them. So you might be wondering, why wasn't
that sounds what a typical squatter would do.
Lucille trying to get them out of her house?
I hope he brings up the one about that crazy one in L.A., where that guy, or not the guy, this guy was like renting to this lady, and she's, paid for like a few months or a year, or maybe it was a year, but then she just kept staying and staying. And it cost like, I think he said it was like $80,000 in lawyers and nonsense to finally get her out.
Her house. Well, to put it plainly, it's because she had already been long dead at that point. Reportedly, Lucille had died all the way back.
This is this one, okay.
Back in 2018. But because she had no friends or family, no one actually reported her missing or dead. Reportedly, she had been found by the squatters sitting in a chair and decomposing. After
I guess they like look into the house to like rob it or something?
this, the police claim that the squatters made the rather horrifying choice of not telling anyone about her death, and they would then cut up her body into several pieces and bury her remains in the backyard.
Yeah, I can't say I'm surprised. I could totally see people doing this, just be like, well, free house.
Part of the home. Then, knowing that no one would be able to report them, they went all out in taking advantage of the situation, robbing the house blind and selling off the woman's personal belongings. It wasn't until months later that people finally grew suspicious and the police would receive an anonymous tip that there was probably a dead body on the property. So at that point, a cop goes to the residence. Reportedly, he had spotted a patch of disturbed dirt. Upon closer examination, he found the remains of Lucille, who had obviously been long deceased by then. In a later statement from
I'm surprised they didn't just move her body off the property somewhere.
Homicide Lieutenant Ray Spencer, we'd find out that the body had been buried in a very shallow grave. The alleged squatters, none of whom seemed to be named anywhere in the press, were promptly arrested after one of them had admitted to the whole thing. Unfortunately, I can't figure out if they were ever convicted for taking the stolen goods and the improper burial, but you would fucking hope so, right?
I mean, knowing how America's justice system works, probably not.
The house would later go on sale for around $435,000. I don't know if I'm going to be copping that one, guys.
Jeez. This guy finds some of the darkest ones ever, or at least the craziest ones. That first one was weird.
This next squatting case showcases just how violent they can be. A recent one, in fact. We now move to New York City, where some of the most depraved squatters roam. Sometime in early March, a 52-year-old woman named Nadia Vitale went to a complex to check on a vacant apartment owned by her late mother. Instead, she allegedly found two squatters, who, per the police's report, attacked and murdered the woman with a blunt object before stuffing her into a duffel bag and then putting it into a nearby closet. They then allegedly left the premises.
Okay, that one is way darker than I would have thought. Jeez.
Getting caught by security cameras and driving away in Nadia's car.
The top story tonight, police say the woman whose remains were found in a duffel bag inside a Kips Bay apartment was killed by squatters who were staying illegally in the unit. Investigators say there was a struggle and the squatters threw the victim into a wall and put her body in a duffel bag.
The woman's body would later be found by her son on March 14th, who called the police immediately.
Jeez, it just keeps getting worse.
A manhunt was launched, and police would claim the suspects had stolen Nadia's vehicle and used it to escape the scene. About a week later, on March 22nd, the suspects had been caught all the way in Pennsylvania. Eventually, as the 22nd rolled around, they would both be taken into custody on suspicion of murder, and they were identified as Hallie Tejeda and Kinsley Alston. Apparently, Kinsley had been a minor at the time of the crime taking place, so her name wasn't immediately revealed to the public. The case is still ongoing, so more info will probably be unearthed as it develops.
Yeah, I mean, for murder, you should probably release the names of people, but I guess the problem is, at least in the U.S., is innocent until proven guilty, and in 100% of cases, they're more than obvious. I don't know. It's complicated. Oh, look, Detroit again.
We now move to a quiet little suburb in Detroit. Sometime in 2015, a property owner who wished to remain unnamed claimed that they had been contacted by a woman named Tanya Houston. She was applying to become a tenant of his, saying she and her kids were about to become homeless if he wouldn't help her, while assuring him that she would be a good tenant. The owner...
Yep, that's the first sign of, oh, we're about to become homeless. Why are you about to become homeless? Did you not pay your last bill for the last house you lived in? No?
Allowed her to move in. And at first she was paying rent, but after just a few months of staying there, she stopped paying entirely.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people do. They make sure they have just enough money to cover a couple of months of rent. That way they seem like a good tenant, then they stop being a good tenant.
The woman, along with a group of friends who were living with her, were told to move out. But instead, her and her friends reportedly began squatting on the property. Rather quickly, this group would start causing a lot of problems for the neighborhood, as they were caught doing everything from sicking their pit bulls on passerbys to even stealing electricity. This would go on for months, with the police reportedly being called to the area at least 7 times. Eventually, their behavior would catch the attention of the media, with news stations like News Channel 7 of Detroit trying to conduct interviews with this mysterious group. And as per their report, we would find out the group was led by Tanya Houston, who would become the, let's just say, the main character of this entire degenerate saga. Now, she wouldn't actually make an appearance during this first interview, as her two companions would end up being the ones to talk to the reporter. These two didn't seem to have any trouble talking to the media and were rather candid in regard to what they were doing.
Hi, how are you? Friday afternoon, I stopped by the house on Eastburn Street, introduced myself to the squatters. That's me.
Oh, okay.
That's me. I'm Ronnie.
Oh, the camera on?
Yeah.
We on the news right now?
Yeah, you sure are, honey. News crew or not, they don't seem to care.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, whatever. We're just here, living. Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, the big thing with squatting is it's not like, in most cases, it's almost impossible to stop, and then it's not. A lot of people won't want to cause violent crime and or do anything violent while they're there, because that means they can stay longer. Because the more cordial you are while you're in the property, you can basically just live there forever, because there's like limited options on what they can do to actually get you to leave.
The fact of these guys being squatters isn't enough for you to already not like them. One of these individuals goes out of his way to make himself as unlikable as humanly possible, when at one point during this interview, a dog walks over to him and, well, he does this.
Billy Joe came down while we were talking with a neighbor, an apparent show of
He's gonna kick the dog?
intimidation, which ended with him kicking her cute little dog. Hey.
Don't touch it. I don't like dogs. I'm allergic to dogs.
Well, we don't like squatters, but you're still here.
Despite the fiery language from this interviewer, the truth is that not much would actually be done about the squatters for a very, very long time. All the while, they continued to terrorize the neighborhood.
I mean, if they're not like actually super violent or anything like that, I mean, terrorizing is complicated. You can do a lot of things to terrorize. Playing stupid loud music, things like that will terrorize people.
Wouldn't be until April of the next year that Houston and her friends actually faced some repercussions, when she received a felony charge over illegal use of public utilities.
Yeah. See, that's what will get you arrested. Stealing from the power the power company and the water company, not not squatting in someone's house. Nope. Not until you start messing with actual public systems does it matter.
Channel 7 would once again be on the scene, and Houston would have some rather choice words for the interviewer present.
Outside the courtroom, Tanya Houston was all mouth. You were the one squatting, not me.
Houston was offered a plea deal to drop the felony charge down to a misdemeanor.
Wow.
Which meant she would avoid potential
That's lucky.
jail time. She didn't actually accept this plea deal, and instead she chose to try to fight this in court.
I'm sure that went real well.
The interim, her and her friends would eventually get evicted from the home. When they left, it was in horrible disrepair.
Yep.
According to the owner, every room had some type of damage, including holes in the walls and pipes missing. It didn't seem that Houston would...
A lot of squatters will steal pipes and things to sell, especially if it's like copper pipes.
...would actually face any charges for the squatting, at least as far as I could find. The case related to her stealing electricity, though, would drag on all the way to 2018, when a jury of her peers found her guilty, giving her 1 year of probation. She would later appeal this decision, arguing that there wasn't sufficient evidence to prove the charge, but fortunately, she lost the appeal.
Probably should have just taken that misdemeanor.
We now move on to a story from northern Texas, where Heather and William Schwab would make a name for themselves as serial squatters. As the story goes, they would approach an unassuming landlord and pretend to want to rent their place out. They would apply to become tenants by presenting themselves as an upstanding family with good jobs, a high credit score, and a bunch of kids. The landlords would accept them into the house, and the family would start paying via checks. However, as I'm sure you astute viewers have already caught on to, there was a bit of a snag, as they pretty much lied about everything in their applications. And
Maybe they're friends with George Santos.
In all reality, their checks were fake and would bounce as soon as the owners tried to cash them. The couple would then start making excuses for why that was, playing on the landlord's good nature by lying about how bad their situation was, or by acting like William was actually a war veteran who had tragically lost his job and needed some time to get
Man, he's got a nice truck, though.
back on his feet. Because of this appeal to sympathy, the landlords would allow them to stay there for longer, often months at a time. At the same time, the couple would allegedly demonstrate a shockingly good understanding of squatter and eviction laws, which allowed them to skirt eviction for as long as humanly possible. But of course,
I wonder how this actually ended. Did they actually get prison time for once? Because it doesn't sound like the majority of people actually get prison time. In this case, it might, though, because if you think about it, these guys were actually trying to game the system entirely, which means they knew what they were doing, whereas a lot of the other squires are just kind of like, I don't feel like moving out.
Of course, they would eventually get kicked out, which would lead them to starting the same process over again. It's frankly crazy just how brazen this couple would get. They would start their little squatting journey all the way back in 2015 and then simply keep it going until 2017, all while flying under the radar. These guys were so
So, okay, so only 2 years. Still.
daring that they would pretty much stay in the same neighborhood, squatting in houses that were less than a mile away from
Okay, that's stupid.
old houses that they had squatted in.
I assume, though, they had, what do you want to call it? They probably wanted to keep their kids in the same school district. And then I bet you, did they actually still have actual jobs and they were just saving tons of money doing this?
Story would eventually get widespread attention when CBS Texas documented and reported on their antics. They interviewed every single landlord that had been taken advantage of by them, and they also did an in-depth investigation into who these people really were. More interestingly for us, though, they would also find Heather Schwab, whom they would personally attempt to interview, to some interesting results. She seemed very intent to use every slimy strategy imaginable to protect her little hustle here. First, she would pretend not to have any idea about anything the reporter was talking about, pretending that the reporter must have been talking about the other Heather. She then attempts to just get the hell out of Dodge, not answering any questions and simply trying to leave the situation entirely.
Well, you and your husband, you don't pay rent and you keep going into more expensive homes when you owe thousands of dollars in back rent.
No idea what you're talking about.
Then she said it was another Heather Schwab.
Well, I know there's another Heather Schwab, in fact, in the same court I am, so.
No, it's definitely you. We've been investigating this for months.
No, it's you.
This news story would gain quite a bit of attention, bringing into focus the couple's rather despicable antics. Still, they wouldn't actually stop doing it for quite a while, eventually getting evicted from 20 different homes until they
20 different houses? Damn.
were finally arrested in November of 2018. Although it wasn't quite for the reasons you might think, as they were actually charged with conspiracy to commit identity theft, to which...
See, so let me get this straight. If they hadn't been arrested for identity theft, they would have been able to continue doing this for potentially decades.
William would plead guilty to, receiving 5 years in prison as a result, and Heather would get 6 years. They were, of course, both charged due to the fraudulent conduct in leasing 2 of the many properties that they had been in. Although I'm not...
Wait, they also leased the properties out? Okay, that's funny.
Sure, if they
that's
were
bad,
actually
but
convicted
really funny.
for this as well. Now, you might think that this is where the story ends.
Of course
and
not.
You'd be hopelessly wrong. In 2020,
Of course
after
not.
only 16 months of serving her sentence, Heather was released from prison.
Probably due to COVID.
And for seemingly good behavior. However, she would
a lot of people were released from prison for good behavior for COVID reasons, 2020.
quickly prove that she hadn't actually changed at all, as she was right back to doing the same old squatting tricks. And we're not talking about the booty shorts in the gym type maneuvers, you know what I'm sizzling? She allegedly sent a message to the potential landlords under her own name, but then explained that she was using her friend's Zillow account, and that her real name was Ray's Ruble. With this fake cover story, it seems she was able to convince the landlord couple.
What? Okay, that's just stupid.
Colin and Jessica Davis to allow her to move in with her then 17-year-old son, who was apparently autistic. To no one's surprise, she reportedly never paid any actual rent, and every check she gave to the family would bounce. And then she would make excuses for why that was the case. The couple would reportedly attempt to start the eviction process, but police refused to do anything about Heather, claiming it was because this was a civil matter and didn't involve.
At some point, they're probably going to have to make it so squatter stuff is no longer civil. They're going to have to make it like criminal. So I don't know. Maybe that's the main reason why a lot of people are getting away with it. Now, I know some laws are coming into place, but they're not fast enough.
All of them. So Heather would stay on the property for months without paying anything. So that's when the couple started to do some of their own deep research into their troublesome tenant, Ray's Ruble. And their own investigation eventually uncovered that they were actually housing none other than Heather Schwab, who was using a fake identity. Once they made this connection, it was turned over to the cops. And with them now knowing it was actually Heather, this was something they couldn't ignore. As a result, Heather would suddenly escape into the night, and she would become a wanted fugitive. In fact, as far as I could find, she still may very well be a wanted fugitive.
They never found her? Oh, that's surprising.
I can't find anything about her getting caught or arrested, so you better lock your fucking doors, because this...
Yeah, jeez. This lady's skilled and crazy.
Crazy-ass woman could very well break into your home next. As for the house
okay, to be fair, it doesn't sound like that she actually breaks into homes. She tricks her way into homes. So as long as you're not renting, you're probably good.
Squatted in, it was left in complete squalor. According to the New York Post, the inside smelled like a mixture of cigarettes and pee. There was
I mean, I was a carpet cleaner for years. That's just every place I ever went to.
Trash and half-eaten food everywhere. So basically, it was like my bedroom back in 2008 when World of Warcraft Wrath of the
Oh, okay. So every single streamer out there. I got it.
Lich King launched.
The tire irons were? Oh, gosh.
Now
This
we
could be
move
like
to
the
the sunny
axe-wielding
state
guy.
of California in Riverside.
Hey.
In January of 2020, a young couple by the names of Tracy and Miles Albert finalized a deal on a large family home with the previous owners of the property, Sam Bochter and his wife, Miriam Khalil. However, when they attempted to move in, they found the house completely barricaded. Why? Well, because the previous owners who had lived at that house decided last minute that they really didn't want to leave. Oh, shit.
He just said he wasn't leaving.
Wait. He sold the house to them, took the money, and then decided, nah, I'm going to stay here.
Was it? Wasn't going to leave the house, barricaded himself in the house.
So who's the guy blocking their way, refusing them entrance to their own home? It's the previous owner.
This would result in an...
Okay, that's a different level. You already got the money, dude.
Over a year-long standoff between the old owners and the new ones. During this time, Sam and Miriam would basically never leave the house, continuing to hold the fort. When the COVID pandemic went into full swing and the state of California put a moratorium on all evictions.
Yeah, guess what? Because of that, and then they added a full delivery to everywhere, you could basically never leave your house if you never needed to.
The old owners ended up being even more secure, as there was basically no legal way to get them out of this house. At some point, after allegedly attempting and failing to get any help from their local government, the Alberts would attempt to enter the house themselves by hiring a locksmith, who did manage to open the door for them. But Sam very quickly runs to the door and shut it, and then when enough people come to pry it back open, the dude threatens them, comes out with a tire iron.
Okay, hey! You want to assault? You want to assault? Get out of my home!
But this wasn't enough to get him evicted, no. In fact, Sam would actually call the police after.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's going to call the police on them for breaking and entering, and they're going to get arrested.
After this incident. And when they arrived, they took his side, telling the family that if they attempted to enter again, that they would be arrested.
Yep. And that's why we have a huge problem with squatters in this country, potentially other countries, but definitely it's a problem here.
The standoff would go on for about 14 months until the story was picked up by Inside Edition, where the couple would give an interview going over everything that I've discussed.
it's too bad that they couldn't get a reversal on the money they paid for it.
Already. The news crews would try to get in touch with Sam himself, but he didn't respond to any calls for an interview. Now, as bad and ridiculous as this situation was, the couple wouldn't have to wait much longer, as just a month after this initial report, the squatting ex-owners suddenly left the house without any explanation. The stubborn squatters likely finally breaking thanks to the pressure applied by the family and the persistent news reporters that were covering this case. The new couple would have the opportunity to finally move in, which ended up being a bit of an emotional moment for Tracy.
Which would have been followed by, well, let's sell the house because I don't think I ever want to live here. Because that's what I expect a lot of people would do.
Say the least.
It's been a hard year.
This next story discusses the tale of a squatter who went to prison, escaped it, and only went back after trying to pull one of the most harebrained heists of his career. Jeffrey Allen. Allow me to introduce you to a man named Jeffrey Allen Manchester.
This one sounds really familiar. I think I saw this one on the news.
Better known by his infamous nickname, the Roof Man, or alternative title, the Rooftop Robber. Not much is known about this man's early life, other than the fact that he used to be an Army reservist, although I haven't been able to ascertain exactly what role he fulfilled. Starting in 1998, however, he would make a name for himself for launching a bizarro series of heists that rocked the nation. Beginning in November of 1998, Jeffrey began to routinely rob McDonald's fast food.
Oh yeah, I remember this. This was crazy. I think I was like 11 or 12.
Restaurants. Now, it wouldn't be this fact alone that makes it particularly remarkable.
It was all over the news. It was insane at the time.
It was the manner that he got into these fast food places. Basically, he would scout out the locations in advance, getting as much information as possible beforehand. Then when he felt comfortable, he would climb onto the roof of the fast food restaurant that he'd been staking out and cut a hole into the roof, and that's how he invaded them. He would enter.
Yeah, they changed a lot of the roofs for a lot of these places. They're no longer just solid hollow pieces underneath now. Now they have a bunch of concrete with them.
In the early hours of the morning before the restaurant opened and hide in the restroom, at which point he would pop out of the restroom with a gun, threatening the staff and locking them in a freezer, and then simply emptying the cash register and getting out of there. Sometimes this would-be roof squatting bandit would be violent in his robbery attempts, reportedly pistol whipping victims, while at other times he was actually remarkably polite to the people that he was robbing, doing them favors in the act, like allowing them to wear coats when he would have them put into the freezer.
Hey, that's nice. I mean, geez, freezer's cold.
As soon as he was done emptying the registers, he would leave with the funds and call the police, tipping them off about what he had done in an effort to make sure that the workers didn't, turn into icicles.
Okay, so I mean, at least he's not like horrible. He's like, hey, I locked a bunch of people in the freezer at McDonald's after I robbed them. Just thought I'd let you know.
As it would turn out, Jeffrey's style of robbery was incredibly successful for him, leading to a massive robbery spree across 9 U.S. states, from California all the way to North Carolina, with the police suspecting that he might have pulled off as many as 40 robberies.
Okay, that is very successful compared to a lot of robbers.
Between 1998 and the year 2000. Due to the unique way that he entered the restaurants that he robbed, he would be dubbed the Roof Man in the news.
Stayed brand loyal, only robbed McDonald's. He's like, you know what? The whole point of this is because they screwed up my order one too many times, and now I'm going to make them pay for it.
Gaining quite a bit of notoriety during his tenure. But all good things must come to an end. And in May of 2000, he was arrested for armed robbery and kidnapping by police in North Carolina.
Wait, isn't this a squatting case? How am I getting confused? This is like a bank robbing case.
After he had attempted to rob 2 McDonald's restaurants in the same day.
Oh,
they
that
would
was a
reveal
mistake.
that Jeffrey was a sergeant in the Army, and that the robberies coincided with his deployments. All in all, this was enough to charge him with these crimes, resulting in a sentence of 45 years. After being sentenced to 45 years, he would be transferred to the Brown Creek Correctional Institution in Polkton, North Carolina. After spending about 4 years inside, while working in the prison's metal shop, he made a successful escape attempt.
Okay. That's
by
where
attaching a plywood platform on the underside of a truck. He would stow himself away in here, and the driver of this truck would unknowingly drive him straight out of prison and to freedom. After this, he would remain at large for several months, with police keeping an eye on his family in California in hopes that he would just come straight to them. But he never would come back to California.
he's like, why would I go back to my family?
Rather, he found a new residence. So
Okay,
how did
so
he
this is where he
manage to
became a
elude
squatter.
authorities for so long as a fugitive? Well, given what this video is about, I'm sure none of you are surprised to learn that he ended up squatting on someone else's property. Specifically,
Of course, it's a Toys R Us.
he ended up making shelter in a retail store, the Toys R Us located in Charlotte.
It kind of reminds me of did you guys hear recently about that lady who was in the top of she was hiding out in a sign for like 9 months in the top of like a grocery store, and they only figured it out because there was like a random cord coming from the inside.
To quote the Daily Beast, he had made a quasi apartment disguised behind a bicycle display in the walls of Toys R Us, burrowing so.
Okay, what? A bicycle in the walls of Toys R Us? That's crazy.
Deep that he had actually dug his way into an abandoned Circuit City, where he made an even more elaborate home for himself. Now, you might think that living permanently in a retail store like this would get a bit dull, but our roofman friend here found a way to make it work. He would steal baby food to feed himself. He'd ride a bike around the empty aisles at night in an effort to keep himself fit.
Did they not have cameras? Wait, what? I know this is like 2000-ish, 2001, or no, this would be like 2004 at this point. How did these stores not have cameras? That makes no sense.
And he'd also play with the RC cars in the store to keep himself entertained, supposedly. Roofman would also often go outside.
I mean, at that point, you might as well just steal a bike and then ride around the Toys R Us, because at least that makes sense.
Specifically to visit a local church where he would actually become quite popular in the community due to the fact that he was oddly charitable. And, you know, he was charitable because he would steal toys from the place that he lived at.
Yeah, okay, so stealing Toys R Us toys to give to people. Okay, I gotcha. Maybe that's why Toys R Us went out of business. But I just don't understand why Toys R Us didn't have cameras. That doesn't make any sense in my head.
And give them to the kids of the church. A real roofman Robin Hood here, guys. And when people questioned him how he was able to afford all these toys, he simply told people, I've got a government job. However, Jeffrey wasn't completely satisfied with just idling in the toy store. In fact, he was in the process of planning a major heist of this said store.
Oh, of course
a
he
heist
was.
bigger than all he had committed prior. That plan was to steal tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise from this Toys R Us that he had lived in for so long, and then move on to greener pastures.
I mean, he probably could have done $1,000 a week, and no one would have noticed for a while.
With tons of pawnable toys and collectibles in his possession. He planned meticulously for this heist, creating his own surveillance systems by strategically placing baby monitors around the...
Which is hilarious because apparently Toys R Us themselves sold cameras, but they didn't have any in their own store to monitor when he was riding a bike around it.
Store. According to police, in preparation for the job, he had also robbed the pawn shop for a gun and allegedly even went as far as to burn down a dentist's office in an effort to destroy his dental records after he had gone there for a checkup.
That's generally not how that works, I don't think. I'm like, if anything, you burn down the dental office while you're robbing the Toys R Us, basically. So you prepped it that way so everyone's distracted.
This elaborate plan to rob the Toys R Us is what would eventually get him caught again. As when he put his plan into motion and jumped the employees that were guarding the store, the two employees evaded his initial attack and reported the incident to police. When they arrived at the store, the assailant was nowhere to be found, so cops had to do some detective work to track down the apparent violence.
I assume they brought dogs in, right?
In Toys R Us. So the police ended up visiting the local church mentioned earlier to conduct some questionings, asking churchgoers if they knew anything about what had happened. Through questioning, they were able to find out that Jeffrey, known by everybody at this church by the fake name of John, he had a girlfriend that also went to the church, and they talked to her, and when she found out that her boyfriend had committed a crime, she worked with police to get him locked up again. This involved his girlfriend inviting Jeffrey to a fake birthday party, where at this
Wow, this is like the most elaborate thing ever.
birthday, it was essentially a sting operation with police arriving and locking him back up. With that, Jeffrey was promptly whisked away back to prison, and he hasn't been able to escape since.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, don't forget he's actually an escaped convict, so that's a whole nother problem.
A squatting story that's short yet sweet, the cheesy tale of the Auburn squatter. This next case takes us to Auburn, Washington, and this story starts sometime around Christmas of 2019, when a supermarket employee called the police over suspicion that there had been some sort of break-in. The police arrived, entered, and upon looking around a vent on the roof, they managed to find tools, clothes, and other miscellaneous.
Okay, this isn't the is this the one that? Okay, let's take a look.
However, there was no sign of any suspect.
I thought it was a different one,
so they were forced to simply leave for the time being. After a few days, the employees began to suspect.
Oh yeah, this is definitely a different one.
that it hadn't been the last time the mysterious visitor would come by, as they would begin to hear strange noises coming from the ceiling, with one of the employees even spotting a pair of legs dangling from the rafters. They called the police, who once again didn't find anyone. Since they were pretty much getting nowhere, the police decided to take the story to the public, releasing camera footage of the suspect moving through the store with a bag full of stolen cigarettes.
This is a glimpse of the person Auburn police have been hunting inside Haggard Northwest Fresh Market,
leading to the suspect getting identified and apprehended just a few weeks later, which the police...
I was like, how the hell did anyone identify this person? Look at the amount of effort they went into to block the what people could see.
Police would announce in a Facebook post. With a search warrant, they managed to find a bunch of stolen cigarettes as well as a $350 block of cheese. The police would never reveal the identity of the man in question.
Oh, of course not. It was just below the threshold, huh? Wasn't it?
What happens when you try to exterminate some squatters that are on your property? Well, you could find yourself facing serious prison time. For this next story, we're going to the town of Sparks in Nevada. Sometime in February of 2014, 73-year-old Wayne Bergello would visit one of his properties, which was supposed to be vacant at the time. He was armed with a pistol when making this check-in. Once there, he found two squatters, 34-year-old Cody Devine and 29-year-old Janae Wilson, sleeping on the ground. Janae in particular had been squatting on the property for 3 years at that point, and they were both meth addicts who had allegedly taken a hit just before going to bed. Wayne had known about the squatters beforehand due to being notified by one of the neighbors, who had called him to report a break-in. Thus, he may have come to the property with the intent to evict them. However, things wouldn't quite go as smoothly, as when he tried to wake them up, asking, "What are you doing here?" Cody woke up and raised his arm. Now to Wayne, this allegedly looked like in the darkness that he was pointing a firearm. So in a split-second decision, the man raised his own gun and shot 8 times in the direction of the two squatters.
Okay, I mean, I can't really fault him directly for this, but I know he's probably going to get tried for this.
Cody was dead on the scene, being hit 5 times, while Janae was hit 3 times and severely wounded, although she managed to run out of the house in order to get medical help. In the end, she would actually survive the ordeal. Following this, the police would start gathering evidence on the case. At first, they did not arrest Wayne, simply letting him roam free. He would later be arrested during a traffic stop, though, and the police would interrogate him. Throughout, he would maintain the story, saying that he genuinely believed he had been in real danger and that he had acted almost purely on instinct.
Does Nevada have a stand your ground law?
With the arrest came quite a bit of media attention. Through these articles, we would find out that Cody was actually a father of 2, and that he was planning to go visit his children in Phoenix, Arizona. The trial would end up being delayed until 2015, throughout which Wayne never changed his story. Needless to say, the prosecutor didn't believe he had a claim to self-defense.
The defendant arrives. comes out of his truck with a gun in each hand.
Okay. He had 2 guns in his hand just pointing. Okay, I don't know about that self-defense one then. Because, I mean, yeah, they were squatters. And, yeah, a lot of people would probably like to shoot them. But, I mean, I'm not sure you can claim self-defense when you just come out with 2 guns automatically. That's iffy.
Opens the door and sees 2 forms on the floor under a blanket, a white comfort, and opens fire.
In the end, after looking at all the facts of the case, the jury found him not guilty, despite the prosecutor arguing that Wayne's actions warranted a first-degree murder charge. Following the ruling,
it just goes to show people hate squatters more than murderers, apparently.
He and his attorney would give a brief interview to the media where the attorney thanked the jury for making what they deemed to be the right decision.
Thank you to the jury for finally seeing what this case was about, which was justified self-defense. And we would like to thank everyone in the community's support as to what occurred here. Thank you.
There was a squatter at Taylor Swift's place. That's funny. Was it one of her super mega fans?
We now return to California, specifically the city of San Francisco, to an over 100-year-old mansion located at Presidio Heights, which at the time had been unoccupied for many years. In 2013, the owner of it had gone bankrupt, losing the home in the process, and since then it had basically been left to rot in a bankruptcy sale. In 2014, the one and only Taylor Swift reportedly expressed the desire to buy the property herself, but that doesn't seem to have happened. It's around this time that the main figure...
So what's the point of calling this the Taylor Swift squatter if she didn't even buy the house? She's maybe thought about it once. That's
dumb. Story comes in, Jeremiah Kaler, describing himself as a master carpenter and father of 5 who's dedicated to, quote, searching for solutions to end the tragic deaths of our children to cancer and guns, unquote. He is a rather kooky character, as you'll come to find. Being rather obsessed with the pop star, Jeremiah Kaler would come upon the house and, according to media sources, he immediately fell in love with it, seeing it as a perfect place.
Because he's obsessed with Taylor Swift, and then he thought that she might go to the house because she wanted to buy it at one point? Okay.
It's to turn into his personal thug mansion.
Jeez.
That's a quote. I didn't write that into the script, okay?
I don't know if I believe you,
Wavy. The summer of 2014, although he wouldn't actually be on the property nonstop. After supposedly sleeping on the front porch for weeks, he'd been run off by the real estate agent. He would return only 2 weeks later. This time, instead of just sitting on the front porch, he tried to open the back door to the main house, which he found to be unlocked. When he entered, he found the place had been terribly moldy and largely unfurnished, but to paraphrase his own words, he saw the beauty of what the house must have looked like when it had been freshly built. Quickly falling in love with the house, he decided to start squatting on the property. While the main house was unfurnished, the guest house was seemingly fully equipped. So after finding the right place to settle, it seems Kaler started to draw up paperwork that would enable him to take adverse possession of the property.
See that creepy smile he had on his like mugshot back there? That's
He pretty much behaved as though the property belonged to him. As a part of settling down, he seemingly saw it fit to sell some of the luxury items peppered throughout the property. And over the next couple of months, he began to sell off expensive paintings that were in the house, reportedly getting extremely underpaid for them, although it doesn't seem like he was very bothered.
Oh, yeah. He was probably getting like, $3,000 for a $50,000 painting or more.
By this. He would also sell a premium stereo system, a Viking stove, and some chandeliers, as well as other household items that he would sell to pawn shops,
He should have kept that Viking stove.
Stores, etc. For the most part, he stayed completely out of people's minds, given the property had long been abandoned. He would spend almost a year in the mansion before someone finally took notice, seeing him load the 11th painting into a van. The police got in contact with Kaler, who explained to them that he was in the process of purchasing the property, producing the documents that were mentioned earlier. If it wasn't clear, these documents were definitely fraudulent and did not actually justify him taking ownership of the house in any way. Surprisingly though, unlike many other stories in today's video, the police would just arrest Kaler merely.
That's actually surprising, just for the fact that, even though the papers were fraudulent, the fact that he actually had papers and the majority of these other people just got, the police are just like, we don't care.
A day after he was discovered as being a squatter. It might have something to do with the fact that the property was valued at $17 million at the time. You know, money talks. Once he was in custody, the police started a lengthy process of recovering the paintings Kaler had sold off, finding them across different pawn shops.
Yeah, he probably made like 10 grand total.
In the end, they were able to recover all 11 of them. As for Kaler himself, he would not actually be charged with squatting or anything of the sort.
No, but he'd probably be charged with theft of those paintings, right?
Instead, he was charged with grand larceny.
Yep.
His defense team would argue he should be set free for the duration of the trial, with the prosecution arguing that that's not viable due
Let me guess, he just disappeared, right?
to him being a flight risk. The judge set the bail at $140,000, which forced him to stay locked up throughout his trial.
Okay.
He had first entered a non-guilty plea. This would become rather amusing because of an interview he would do right after doing so. This interview is where I drew a lot of the information in this story from, as Kaler pretty much admits to everything that we just discussed.
Of course he did.
Meaning there's pretty much no room for claiming it didn't happen. So needless to say, they didn't have a difficult job getting him convicted. Likely realizing he couldn't get out of this situation, he eventually pled guilty to 2 felony counts, including grand theft and identity theft. He received a 1-year prison sentence and got 5 years of probation.
I don't even know what to say about that guy. I mean, as far as all the squatters go, that one seemed the least insane, which is hilarious because it's from San Francisco, but okay.
Next, I have another grim squatting story for you all that turns murderous.
Of course.
The setting of this one is across multiple states in the northeastern coast of the U.S. Allow me to introduce you to a man named Jameson Bachman. From a glance, Jameson would appear as a rather upstanding member of society, with a good childhood where he would consistently demonstrate his intelligence, his confidence, and his aptitude for pretty much everything. In adulthood, he got a master's degree in history, and at the age of 45, he even got a law degree from the University of Miami. However, he never actually passed the bar, meaning he couldn't practice law. Jameson would first squat at a residence owned by one Arlene Harabedian. The man had given this woman the impression that he would only stay at her place for about a month or two. But this promise was almost immediately broken, and he would go on to stay there for over 4 years, out of which he had only paid for a single month of rent.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Stayed there as a quasi-roommate for the rest of his time there. In 2010, after the 4 years had passed, Arlene finally got fed up with dealing with him.
I thought this was going to be way earlier because this is in like... The only picture they have of him is in black and white.
And she slapped him across the face, to which Jameson also responded violently by grabbing her throat. However, she ran away and went to the police before it escalated any further, filing an eviction notice instead. Now here's when Jameson's law degree experience really comes in. Instead of claiming squatters' rights or anything of the sort, he made a statement to the police that he'd been threatened with a knife. This led to Arlene getting arrested instead, allowing him to squat at her property. As soon as he had the house to himself, he put all of Arlene's pets in kill shelters. Again though, unlike most squatters,
wow, what a dick.
He didn't stay here for long, as he would eventually move out of the house. This would launch an almost 4-year stint of him hopping from house to house and squatting on various properties. He had developed a rather bulletproof method that would allow him to do so pretty much indefinitely, with roommates and owners being unable to actually do anything to counter him. His scheme involved him paying the first month of rent via check, and then never paying again. Using all kinds of excuses and legal jargon to avoid coughing up money, highlighting things like dirty dishes and a general mess in the household to make the point that the owners weren't taking a good enough care of the place to warrant getting paid.
He was also smart in the fact that he did it with roommates and things like that, so it's even harder that way.
Rent.
And less likely, when you have a bunch of roommates and you're splitting the rent like that, it's less likely that they're gonna go to court directly for it. They're just gonna, especially if he was it sounded like he was leaving within a couple of months and kept moving, so it was a little bit different.
The work that he was putting in to live there was enough to allow him to stay. There are many, many examples of him repeating this cycle, with over a dozen different households being affected by him. Every time he would come in and play to their own desperation and pity, and every time he would progressively try to push them out of their homes. Of these, there were a couple that stand out. In 2012, Jameson settled into a home owned by a woman named Melissa Frost. Following the same standard sob story formula, he came in pretending that he had lost his home in a hurricane and that he just needed a place to crash for a bit.
I had only arranged to just meet him. I had not arranged to have someone with all of their worldly possessions showing up at my house. He was insisting. I stated multiple times, word for word, this is making me uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable right now. You're gonna have to at least give me a night to think about it.
Despite feeling uneasy about it, she would eventually accept him in.
That was a mistake. That was absolutely a mistake.
And he would pay for the first month of rent without hassle. Things seemed fine at first, but then he started getting progressively worse to be around, complaining constantly about every little thing. At some point, she told him to pack his things and leave, but he refused.
He tried to give me a check for December, and I said, what the hell is this? No, you're leaving. And he said, well, I'm not leaving.
He would also start being physical, although never in a way that would actually get him in trouble.
He knew how to terrify you and to let you know that he could do serious harm to you without really crossing that line legally. So he would hold his fingers like this and shove you in little shoves while talking to you, or he would poke you.
So it couldn't cause any sort of major bruising or anything like that? At least nothing that would make sense? Ooh, this guy is a psycho on another level, isn't he?
In the chest while yelling at you?
While there are a lot of other examples I could go over here in greater detail, there frankly just isn't enough time. So instead, let's narrow down our focus on one of his very last victims, Alex Miller, who lived in Philadelphia. Jameson would approach Alex sometime in 2017, claiming to be a New York City lawyer by the name of Jed Creek, who came to Philly in order to take care of his ailing mother and brother. That name, Jed Creek, is one he would actually use on a number of occasions. Alex was initially quite welcoming to the new roommate, as her last tenant had just left and her lease was going to be renewed soon. It helped that at least at first he actually seemed quite charming.
Too bad that last tenant didn't stay longer, huh?
Being rather put together for his age. For context, he was around 60 years old at that point. In her own words, it seemed that they had started off on a good note. Jameson had brought his dog with him so that he could meet Alex's black Labrador. He pulled out a check for $800.
This is after he apparently killed what's her name's his last roommate's dogs, or not last, the roommates before. I don't know, maybe it was like 6 roommates before at this point, who knows. Jeez, why would he even have pets?
In order to move with her, which cleared. As mentioned, things went well for the first couple of days. However, while Jameson would usually be able to squat at the place for months without raising flags, this time things started getting tense barely 2 weeks into his stay, when he refused to split the utility bill with Alex, and even threatened to go to court over the matter. At first, Alex chose to ignore it, figuring she must have been wrong to even ask. But things would only get weirder from then on. One day she came
Of course you split the utility bill in most cases. What the heck?
back home to find that she couldn't turn on her lights. Upon investigating, she found that the bulb
He also seemed to target specific types of women, which is another huge thing.
bulbs were missing, discovering that Jameson had taken them to his room for his own purposes. At this point, she couldn't help but be suspicious. So with the help of her mother, she began to investigate Jed Creek. Quickly, she found out that she was the latest victim in a long-running scam, finding many other victims being taken advantage of by a man by this name going back many years. Feeling understandably indignant, she decided to go about getting him out of the house. The woman organized a party and posted about it on Facebook, dubbing it a send-off serial squatter Jason Bachman party, where she invited 12 people, including her mother. She played loud rap music, Jameson's least favorite genre of music, as well as handing out drinks to the guests and even going as far as to print out photos of Melissa Frost and putting them up in the bathroom, making a sort of altar for her with candles, knowing that Jameson would eventually find it and know that she was onto him. Eventually, she would hear Jameson screaming at his computer in the bedroom, and then he would emerge, dumping kitty litter into the toilet, presumably to clog it. He then stormed off with his dog in tow. When he was gone, Alex got her friend to remove the knob on Jameson's door. Things further escalated the next morning. Jameson came back to the apartment and forced his way into the bathroom, where she was brushing her teeth. He immediately started choking her out, only stopping at...
I want to know why why the heck did she stay, at the house after doing this to him without any sort of like backup? Because obviously he was going to go off his rocker.
After she no longer made sounds, he stormed back into his room with Alex following behind. When Alex entered the room, Jamison threatened her with a serrated knife and tried to get her out. But when her leg got stuck in the door, he simply stabbed it. Immediately, police were called to the scene. When they interviewed Jamison, they noted that he was behaving quite politely at the time. But when they saw the injury Alex had sustained, they arrested Jamison on the spot without hesitation. Upon getting medical treatment, Alex would comb through all of Jamison's things back at the house. She found hundreds of legal documents from the cases that he had filed, confirming without a shadow of a doubt that she was dealing with the infamous serial squatter. This would be the last time Jamison squatted in a stranger's house, although it's not quite the end of the story. Taking pity on him, his brother Henry decided to pay his bail. The Miller household
that's not good.
Then schedule a meeting with him, with police as a mediator, where Alex would give him back his belongings, including his cat Abigail. However, his dog Zachary was not included in this transfer and was sent to live with a woman in the suburbs. Enraged, he would drive up alongside Alex as she was leaving and threaten to kill her before driving off. She told the police and he was promptly rearrested. His brother Henry would once again bail him out, and Jamison would then ask his brother,
I swear, when everyone all the time are like, but for family, do it for family.
if he could live with him. Henry, though, refused, and when Jamison asked for help in getting the cat back, he found that the cat had already been put into foster care. Less than a week later, as Harry was about to leave his house for New York for a scheduled visit, he saw Jamison driving up to the property. He texted his wife to let her know Jamison was coming to visit, which sadly would be the last time he'd ever speak to her. Henry was supposed to arrive in New York sometime at night, but he never did. His wife Caroline called the police to do a wellness check at the residence, where they found quite the bloody scene in the kitchen. A trail of blood led to the basement door, and in the basement, Henry's body was found. Immediately.
So this guy bails him out twice, and then for all the help that he does, he gets murdered for it? Jeez.
Jamison was deemed a suspect, and they started a search for the man. They would find him not long after, checking into a hotel under the name Henry H. Bachman. The testimonies of what happened during apprehension differ. While the initial police report said he'd given himself up willingly, a later statement would claim that he'd actually started swinging an axe at a SWAT team officer as they entered.
What's with squatters and axes?
Later in his mugshot, it was clear that he had been beaten and bruised a bit, which doesn't align with the idea that he gave himself up willingly. Jamison was charged with the murder of his brother. His court date was set for December 11th.
I'm honestly surprised he didn't murder any of the women that he was squatting, because it looks like he targeted specific types of women, which, geez, what the fuck? And then he murders his own brother, who helped bail him out multiple times.
11th, but he ended up committing self-delete a few days prior, hanging himself in his own cell. Jamison's story was well documented in the media.
Wow, Netflix has a channel called, okay, geez.
Yeah, and it would eventually lead to the release of 2 episodes in a Netflix miniseries called The Worst Roommate Ever, of which the last 2 episodes were dedicated to him.
Of course.
Well, that was the Squatters video for you. Let me know what you guys thought about this one down below in the comments section, and let me know who or what you want me to talk about next. I want to give a major shout out to my patron.
I mean, no more squatters. Jeez, these people are nuts. But they're so hard to talk about, though, which is part of the problem. Man, that just bugs me. Anyway, have a good day, everyone. This is Wavywebsurf. Go check out their channel. Subscribe to mine if you want. All right, see ya.